Welcome to the latest episode of Enterprising Minds. Excited to have everybody on today. We are going to do a bit of a different one from our kind of normal back and forth. It's going to be a lot of our normal back and forth, so you don't have to be worried. But I'm a big fan of the content marketing podcast from Joe Pulizzi and Robert Rose called This Old Marketing. And on one of their most recent episodes, or episodes in July, I should say, they talked about sort of how your personal plan or your plan B might have to be your plan A now. And I'll let Alex sort of summarize it and lead it in because he does a better job of that than I do. But it was something that really resonated with me, and it's something that we've talked about before. So yeah, Alex, kicks off.
Sure. Well, it kind of talks about career, and it was focused kind of like on mid-level career individuals, kind of mid-career. So if you're in your 20s, but 30s and 40s, this is especially relevant to you. But even if you're older than that, you're still affected by this. And that basically is the rapidly changing job market and how job application process and networking and finding that next role has significantly changed in the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, especially. And it's going to continue to change. So things, because of that, change the way that you then have to perceive your career and how you perceive how you're going to basically continue this career lifestyle, basically from one company to the next. And this is outside of that podcast, and we'll kind of hit that topic. I just wanted to share a couple of stats that I found that are relevant to this. And I wanted to first start with you guys guessing the first one. So this is the guessing game for these next. I've got 3 questions here.
$1.
If you, what's that?
$1.
$1, Bob. $1. You. There's always one. 500. 501. You're familiar with Price is Right. There's some gummy little rules around that one.
Who didn't skip school to watch Price is Right?
Yeah, exactly. You didn't skip school enough. Yeah, there you go. You got to pretend you have stomach aches more often. Good daytime TV. All right. Let's say you are 20 years old. You are in a probably junior level role currently. How many companies, starting today, will you likely work at before you retire at age 65? So you're 20 years old, you're working at one at least, and you're going to probably switch jobs a few times, switch companies a few times. How many times do you think you're going to switch before you retire at age 65 based on current trends?
10.
10 different companies like coming up?
My knee-jerk reaction is to say 30, and that feels high, but then you start thinking, like, if you only spend 2 years at a company, that might not be that high. So 20. I'll go 20.
You guys are really good at this. About 13 companies likely. Average tenure around a junior level role in marketing is about 2 years. Once you get up to mid, you get to 3. And if you're an executive, 4. That's it.
Wow.
If you're CMO at a SaaS company, you're talking 18 months, or tech or anything like that. That's less. If you're in just the tech world in general and you're in marketing, cut it down by about half. If you're in agency world, this is kind of focusing on in-house roles. Just add 3 to the numbers that I'm saying. So as a 20-year-old, instead of 13, think 16. Let's say you're 30 years old. How many more companies will you work at before you retire? Now you're kind of a little further in your career, so you're not doing that junior level kind of quick change around 2 years. Now you're in your 3s and 4s. So how many more?
I wish I was better at math.
I'm going to go with 7 to 8.
Yeah.
7 to 8?
Maybe 10.
Right there. Yep, about 10 companies. 9 to 10 more companies you're going to work at. If you're 40 years old, you have about 5 to 6 more companies to work at. And let's go back to 20. How many times can you expect to be laid off? if you're 20 years old?
8.
2.
We have a pessimist and an optimist. Can we get a realist? 3. On average, you will probably be laid off 3 times
Wow.
by the time you retire. And even if you're in your 40s, you can still expect about 2 more times you're going to get laid off. So 1 to 2, because layoffs are increasing so much. It's not like, oh, you skipped it. No, you're still hitting that same wall that everyone else is running after too.
Did they? Okay, I'm gonna pause you quick on the layoffs are increasing. Did they talk about in this article, and happy to go find other articles of when that pickup happened and what the rate is looking like? Are we talking like all of a sudden in the last 3 years the rate of increase has gone up a lot? Or has it been steadily increasing, say, over the last 10 years, and we're looking at a more linear?
Oh, I would bet it would be even longer
progression?
than that, from the 90s until now.
Yeah.
Let me get to it. I actually did look up some of those data points too.
Because what I was thinking about while you're looking those up is, okay, is this specifically because of the shift we've seen with Gen AI in the last couple of years, and all of a sudden companies are doing a lot of turnover, at which point maybe we find another equilibrium here in the next few years? Or is this something that's been progressively happening over the last, decade, 2 decades, per Dave's comment?
It's been increasing over time.
Okay.
Really, it's been a steady stream of increasing, where really companies have really shifted to this model of nobody stays around for 30 years. Doesn't matter if you work here 20 years, you're going to get laid off and turned around. That kind of economic shift, that company finance shift is really what's hitting this, because it's basically all wage and salary US workers dropped from 4.1 years in 2022, that's only a few years, to 3.9 in 2024. And it's the lowest that's been, basically, and it's just continuing that way. Digital marketing can sometimes have a tenure of basically back of in 2022 around 4.8, but now we're down to 4.1. So it actually dropped quite a bit in just a couple of years. And then the other one was among marketing teams. Those data points were basically across the United States based on Bureau of Labor Statistics. So that's kind of a really, really broad base. Anybody who's basically has a salary job, those are the numbers. But for marketing, because digital marketing, I swear, gets hit more frequently. And there are certain roles that get hit pretty frequently.
Your episode on is digital marketing a luxury good?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's a good callback. Go to that episode after this one.
Required people. It's not a luxury anymore. Among marketing teams, 85% of leaders reported layoffs in the last 2 years, particularly in digital marketing, with 31% of roles being impacted based on a survey from Harvard Business Review. So digital marketing especially does get hit pretty hard, but CMOs still are only talking about 4 years, doesn't matter. There are certain companies, healthcare is slower. You have a longer tenure there. And as you kind of get higher up, you get a longer tenure. If you're in startups or agencies or tech companies, SaaS companies, anything like that, the tenure is very, very short. So, but the numbers don't really change that much. I mean, you're still talking 4 years, doesn't matter. So what the company that you are working at right now is a paragraph on your resume, because it is soon going to be that you work from here, from this date to this date, and now you work someplace else. And you can expect to work at 13 more companies, 10 more companies, 5 or 6 more companies. It doesn't matter. That trend basically continues. It's now this broken system, getting back to what the core of the podcast was about, where you no longer have this straight line, this straight shot from I graduated from college, I get my junior level job, I work that for a couple of years, I get my mid job, I work that for a couple of years, I get my senior job, I work that for, I mean, you kind of just, you keep on one train, one track, and you're moving just up and along. The problem is now is these roles are so short, and the new jobs and number of companies is so frequent and so many, it's very, very broken up now. So you're zigging and zagging constantly. So basically, it's how do you find some source of security, and where do you focus your stability off of to kind of make sure that you can get that next job? Because let's say you laid off 3 times, that means you're doing a good job and you got fired. How broken of a system is that? Like, you did a good job, you still got fired. So there's no safety, element of saying like, oh, I'm doing better than this person on my team. Well, your entire department got cut. Doesn't matter. Everybody's done. Everybody's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So
in which case it's no longer about you.
Who said, holy smokes, what can we do? You need to be here. Right. Like,
yep.
Right. And Alex, I think this was the thing that really stood out to me on this episode. And I'll put links in the show notes for this one because it is on a specific thing. It's on the back half of the episode. The thing that really stood out to me was was that they said the risk profile has changed for going to college and constantly upskilling to earn that higher wage, right? You can be at that company, you can learn a whole bunch of things, and then maybe you move horizontally to another company and then learn a bunch of things. And so long as you're developing, you're okay. If you stay stagnant, you're dead. But with that, if you take the lens of the traditional sort of investing and the finance side of things, right, you need to kind of diversify your risk. How do you do that as an individual? It's through your network. And I remember for me, coming from a non-traditional job, which very much was you either have a network of musicians or you don't get any gigs because you're constantly fighting, or if you don't know the promoter of a certain club, you're just not getting in, right? So you take all those random jobs to get to know people so that you can be within the community and have a higher chance of, getting a gig. I took that mindset in, and I think I told the story before, but I remember going to my first industry conference. It was at the MinSearch convention. And like any conference, you have the opening day keynote in the big auditorium. And I remember walking in, and this could just be my own sort of like competition problems, but I remember standing in the doorway, seeing like 1,200 people sitting in the auditorium going, every single one of these people is my competition. Right? Now I can see Ruthi shaking her head. If you're watching the YouTube thing, it's worth, seeing that expression. But for me, it really was this like, oh my God, I really am competing against everybody else who says they're an SEO or who says they're a digital marketer, who has some kind of whatever. And then as the rest of the day went on, there were certain things where I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? This group of people, I don't really have to worry about competing with them because they're on this different path. Like they're more IT related, technical SEO than the business creative side, right? Like that's going to be where my specialty is. But differentiating yourself with all the structural changes, with AI coming up and with people being let go, and then, AI being used in the application process. And I think it is reverting back to who who you're getting lunch with, who you can reach out to. All of the interesting things that have happened to me recently is purely because somebody knew me or somebody knew one of my friends. So I was a safe person to reach out to. And then we grabbed a coffee and started talking. And, that's allowed me to get some insights into how things are going at other places. And again, build out that network of people who can ask questions of each other while we try to make our day jobs as good as they can be. Right.
Yeah, I think about that. And I shake my head at your competition comment just simply because we have such a different way of looking at the world around us. And I very much enjoy the juxtaposition. Some of the thoughts that were coming to mind as you were describing this, first I'm digesting the information you provided, that's quite startling. That's a huge turnover. I am still very far from that mindset. I would say this idea that we're going to have, how many did you say? I'm still going to have 7 to 8 more companies in my career is surprising. I don't think about my career trajectory in that way. But I don't doubt on the average that's the case. And I'm certainly going to have a number of additional companies that I work for. The layoff number, I think, is also somewhat startling of, when you're 40, you can still expect to have 2 more layoffs. Well, that's something to think about. How dynamic our work lives might be by, to your point, no, out of our control, right? We might be doing everything right and still have some major curveballs thrown our way. And so how do you position yourself for that? So 3 different tangents off of this. So the first one is, if I put my economics hat on, I go, okay, so wages are sticky, possibly organizational inertia. So like the way that companies do things, that's very sticky. And so maybe the reason that we see layoffs increasing over time is because the companies, leaders of companies, management professors, et cetera, have discovered layoffs is one way in which you can get out of that organizational inertia. If you've got to make a big change, it takes longer perhaps to do a bunch of organizational switch ups than it does to sort of lay people off, resource reallocation, et cetera. And that just, for me anyways, understanding the logic behind it or the reason behind it, whether or not that's a good reason, bad reason, sort of, we're talking morally neutral, but it helps me process and go, okay, I'm understanding the dynamics of what's going on here. So that's one lens I have. The next one I have is, okay, what skill sets then do I need when I'm adapting to this sort of continuous change? And I know you guys will talk a little bit about upskilling yourself and sort of what that change is. The first thing that came to mind for me is, one of my skills that I want to continue improving and developing is being able to connect with people and connect with teams quickly, because if there's such turnover, I don't want to have a lot of lag time, because it could be that I've got X amount of time to work with a group of people to do something cool on a given project, and then we're going to move on. And so that might be something I hadn't thought about as much before, is how quickly can I do the orient, figure out where I am, and act loop in order to move forward on a project. And then the last one I was thinking about, and feel free to pick any of these apart or run with them, is this idea of trust, and what you said, Dave, about how a lot of the interesting things that have happened recently have been because of somebody you know. And I wonder if that only is going to increase because of the flood of information, the flood of, okay, we now have access to a very different world than we did because of Gen AI. Hey, maybe that means that we are going to rely even more on the people we know, because it serves as the best filtering mechanism in a world where we're flooded with information. This is just as true on the sort of resume requests. If the ability to create a resume, and a very good resume, increases because of LLMs making it easy, well, then all of a sudden I need a different filtering mechanism than who has the best resume. And that falls back to who I know, because that trust relationship is quite important.
The big thing that jumps out to me, and I know we've talked about things like Clayton Christensen's idea of the cult of new finance, and how, paying attention to the wrong metric leads to the wrong things, like paying attention to gross margin versus net margin, and how, you end up slicing off the bottom end of your portfolio just to, spite your face, and then you wonder why you're losing market share. Well, because you allowed the incumbents to take the lower margin, higher profitability kind of, higher volume thing while you were in search of profitability, right? So I think there's that issue, but then there's also, I still think there's the rippling of, was it Jack Welch, the GE CEO, who became super famous for productivity and laying people off if it just didn't work, or it wasn't going the way. And I think there are a lot of people that his ideas, even though they've been debunked now, are still a safer bet than having to stick your neck out and say, well, I think we're going to have to ride through this and try to maintain staffing levels, even though there's a negative transition, because on the other side, we need to be able to hit the ground running. It's easier to say, no, we're going to go go for profitability and keep the shareholders happy, and whoever's with us is whoever's with us. Like that to me is part of the fundamental problem of the trust between the workers and the company. Where it's like the company's not going to hire people or promote them because the workers aren't showing the same loyalty, but the companies aren't sharing the same loyalty. So what's the incentive to show loyalty? So it's really a chicken and the egg problem, and I definitely don't have an answer. I'm throwing this out as ideas to mull over, because I do think there's some structural problems with this, and I would be interested in anybody outside of the US, like what your thoughts are on this, because this feels very, very US, like you can get your head cut at any time, kind of thinking.
Yeah, I think at will employment has that negative action to it, and it's how far does that push until there's some sort of action against that. I mean, that is the law. Basically, it's at will, so it's at any point you can be let go for any reason.
Right.
You don't need a reason, actually. You can just be let go. Because of that, then employment becomes very, very tentative, which then there's a response to that of unions or stronger work environments, or the better work environments, the better contracts is where people then shift to. It's not so much about invested stock or anything like that. Maybe it's about contract employment that's guaranteed, or guaranteed pay.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, you and I talked about kind of like an athlete-based system where it's like, you're only working. It's a very different way to think about yourself. Actually, this is kind of a cool model, because you think about yourself as a sports athlete. They have a very, very short career time frame. So they're trying to make the absolute most out of it. And whatever that signing bonus deal is, and whatever those guaranteed pay is, because they might be injured and they might be done with their entire career in the next month. So they're very aggressive about an extremely large amount of money in a very, very short period of time, and making sure that they look like the best one. They have an agent who's constantly hammering to make the best deal for them. I mean, that was another one from a different podcast, but talking about the moment that you have a contract that involves, equity or stock, you need an employment lawyer to look over that before you sign it.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't even know that you should. They sign, and then suddenly an IPO happens and nobody knows about the giant amount of taxes or potential, weights on funds. I mean, there's a lot of financial impacts that happen once you get, to these more complex agreements. But maybe that becomes maybe that becomes an apartment, instead of like, man, everybody wants an open office plan or hybrid work days. I want a guaranteed 18-month contract, something like that. Maybe that's a market shift that happens.
Or if you're forcing in office, then I want, an extra 15% on the check because of the hassle of, coming in. I've been mulling with that idea for a long time. Like, it originally came while I was doing my MBA. The Dan Pink, the author, if you're familiar with him, in one of his books on creativity, he talks about the Hollywoodification of the workforce, and this was over 10 years ago. So this is definitely not a new idea, but I've just been, because of the amount of sports documentaries I'm forced to watch, because I can't watch what I want to with, my kid in the house. If you take that perspective of, okay, I'm going to do 3 years for 400,000, that's a very different look than, here's my annual salary. It's like, okay, but for how long? For what? Then what?
Yep.
Because if you like certainty feels nice, but if you could sign a contract for 3 years at 750,000 with 500 of it guaranteed, are you going to sign that contract? Yeah, probably. You can suffer for 3 years. It's a very different mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, getting back to Ruthi, some of your tangents that you had mentioned, one of them in particular, like talking about upskilling and trust and AI. I think that's actually kind of combined up a bit, because in times of uncertainty, people always go back to what they know and what they trust. right? So you got a fallback model, right? So I think that increases during a time where you have concerns of any kind. Doesn't really matter what situation you're in. If it's a really complex, you're buying a new house and you're signing for a mortgage, you talk to some people who you didn't think about, the month prior, but now you're thinking about them because, man, this mortgage stuff is annoying and complex. Like those changes, you immediately fall back to those you trust, right? Might be a new realtor, new bank, so there's no trust there. Instead, you fall back to the ones you do trust and try to kind of pull that forward. So I think during AI shift, we see that. Dave, you had mentioned about, friends reaching out to you. I just recently had some colleagues who have reached out to me about random stuff because they knew I was doing some AI stuff and they had other questions.
Right.
They were just falling back to the ones they trust. So with job changes and job function changing with AI tools, it's going to be really hard to judge who's the best person for the job. Like, who's the best GPT landing page creator? I don't know. Who's the best, whatever, whatever situation that might appear in the next 6 months or 9 months, which we don't really know exactly what that's going to look like. So who do I pick? I pick somebody who's broad-based enough and skilled enough and seems to have some interest or background in this area. And that's the best I got. Which it's a lot easier for other people to try to fake it, but maybe it's a great point to entry actually into the market because you can show that you have a skill that no one else has. It's not like anybody has 10 years of ChatGPT expertise under their belt. Everybody's starting out fresh. So it's the competitive market, speaking of Dave's earlier point, also has expanded in some ways too, because you're going to be competing against other people who have just started and those skills that they have are just as relevant as yours.
Mm-hmm.
One other random stat, because this is depressing. How much time are you going to spend not desired unemployment before you retire? Because of layoffs, and it's not easy to find a job. So if you're 40 years old, you can expect to not work for about a year and a half.
Yeah, I was going to say 3 years because I was thinking you're going to go
nice
20
sabbatical.
Yeah, you got a couple of layoffs means, and it's a more senior level role means you might be doing 6 to 12 months to find the next job.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking also about the diversification of finances and all the rest, you don't have a solid career from now to then till 65. You also don't have a solidly increasing career. You're probably going to take some horizontal or even some slight negatives roles just to keep working or find the better role, the better fit, and kind of keep on going. Hopefully, that is the only enforced, not unintentional kind of unemployment. But if you're switching jobs and you're moving things around and roles are shifting all the rest too, then hopefully you have more seamless employment because you're moving from one company to the next during that period of time. So it also kind of puts a little pressure on those who want to stick around. I mean, myself, I'd even include in that bucket to try to stick around with one company. You're going to start hitting that 10-year number pretty fast too. There's risk to not moving too.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get to solving this, some actions on this. And that podcast went into a lot of that. So let's kind of, Ruth, I'm going to skip one or two of your tangents, but I'm going to kind of try to shift us into that conversation of how do you create that? And one of the most telling phrases out of this that hit me the hardest was your audience is your network. That's a shift in mindset for me. I always think of network as being like individuals or random people you've added on LinkedIn, but you have an audience as well. And that was something that they were pushing a lot, was basically is discussing about what can you be passionate about and not just like, oh, I got laid off. Now I need to start up a blog and start up a website and start doing things. Oh, I got hired. I'm going to stop everything.
Mm-hmm.
Start and stop, start and stop. Are you really going to create an audience or a base, a consistent, solid base that you can rely upon, basically a support network that you can rely upon during those in-between job changes? And if you're just popping here and popping there, no. And if you're just starting it up, it's going to be small and you're going to struggle. So it puts you at a considerable disadvantage. So how do you basically maintain and create an audience? And what would that topic even be about? And how do you basically make sure that you're feeding that audience basically throughout time, make sure that you have that when you unexpectedly need it?
And so, Dave, when you were talking about diversification being particularly important and you look towards diversification of your network, it ties back to this in particular, which is assume you're going to be laid off at least 2 to 3 times within your career. Could be more, right? That's an average. So you could be
That's
more,
an
you
average.
could be one of the lucky ones, right?
Yeah.
Assume you're going to be laid off 2 to 3 times. How do you diversify your portfolio of being able to get hired, which your resume, your LinkedIn profile, those are parts of that portfolio. But then, Alex, it sounds like one of the things they talked about that really struck you was your audience and the people with whom you're communicating, albeit in a one-way fashion. They are part of that diversification.
Correct. Exactly. And those things that you do have an impact as well on you being different and diversifying your own skill set as well. While more of this was more professional related and what you'd be sharing out to a network or a Substack or however you want to basically make this happen, LinkedIn, whatever it is going to be. Let's say you're really passionate about, I think these examples of like butterflies or something, and you created like the best butterfly searching website or some random thing, like you had an interest in this and you did something about it that adds to your resume and adds kind of personal flavor to it, but also gives you an opportunity to expand in a way that your job might not allow you to. So then you have more diversified skill set, you have something of interest, and it's also something that you can talk about that's maybe more consistent than a career. And maybe all those projects that you really wanted to do, I was just talking to some about work, and we're talking about implementation in 6 to 8 months from now. Well, if you're looking at numbers like this, 6 to 8 months is actually kind of a little bit too long. Which means I might be doing work for the next 6 to 8 months and then never see the fruition of it because I won't be around to see the fruition of it. Like, that means I don't get that on my resume. That means I don't really get that skill. I don't actually get to see, the retrospective of it, of what worked and what didn't. I don't get to have that experience. But if I had a side thing, I could continue that as much as I wanted for as long as I wanted, and that can contain kind of what I'm going after.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me was coming out of the creative side, and like my entry into the business world was creative writing and being able to do copywriting or ghostwriting. In those particular types of jobs, there's an expectation that you have a portfolio in addition to your resume. Like they want to see work samples, they want to see those types of things, right? To prove that you actually know how to do the creative work and that the creative work is worthwhile, right? I have leveraged that mindset even in the non-creative marketing roles that I have. If you go to my website, you will see an entire section of case studies that I've put together on the projects that I'm particularly proud of. And I'm like, I just got done writing a new one. Actually, I haven't uploaded it yet, but constantly updating that so that, if I am in a job interview, or that particular project might be a good case study for somebody that I had a coffee with, I can send them that webpage and say, here's this, here's the example that I brought up, and you can go take a look and, follow up if you want more. Those sorts of things I think are really powerful. And I'm not actually finding a lot of other marketers who think that way. Like, as you go along, write down the examples of the things that you're proud of and not just what you did most recently. So that would definitely be something that I would recommend for a lot of people, but then also figure out what you want to be known for and how do those case studies ladder up to those topics.
And I think what you've done is not just reflect on the projects that you're proud of or the projects that you think went particularly well, but you've taken them and you've packaged them up in a way that's shareable, which perhaps both of you might be more in tune with or inclined to do because of your background doing more agency freelance. Whereas that thought would never occur to me of, oh, I need this I have this resume, I have this LinkedIn profile. What do you mean I need this other thing? And at the same time, I think about my aunt used to be a copywriter slash producer, and my uncle used to be a photographer and a filmmaker. And of course they had that, right? Because anytime you're going to do a job, here's my body of work, here's what I come with. And that's just part of the discourse of deciding whether or not you're going to work with somebody, especially if, to your guys' point, trust becomes more important. What other basis do you have than the suite of work that you have if you don't know somebody?
Yeah, trust signals.
Yeah.
And I do think, I mean, if you're at the beginning of your career, like when I was talking to the students earlier in the year at the college, it was, and they asked like, all right, we're not super confident in the job market or the economy. What do we do? And I said, anything you can get your hands on. Like go volunteer, go, hit somebody up that's doing something that you find interesting and see if you can buy them a coffee or get involved somehow, or just like if you have a ton of time but no marketable skills, go invest some of that time and to get those skills so that you can then have those conversations in your later interviews. Of I wasn't just sitting at my mom's couch, I was volunteering for sheltered dogs, or I had a coworker who for whatever reason got into rehabbing squirrels in a nature center, and that ended up leading to her next thing. And you're like, that okay, what? But that's fantastic.
But it's this whole idea of like you do stuff and then stuff happens. What you guys are talking about is you're just opening a bunch of doors, not all the way, but you're just opening a few of them and seeing which ones. And it turns out that maybe having more doors open is now table stakes.
Right. And I do feel like on the opposite side of that, when you're on the older, more senior levels, there's a lot of other things that have to come into play too for a particular role. Like if you're going to be a CMO of a business or even a VP of a business, like, do you have the particular skill set as well as the right mindset for the situation the company is in? Right? Because if you're a turnaround specialist and everything is fantastic at the company, that's not the right fit for you. So you shouldn't expect to become CMO when you're a turnaround specialist. You should follow the ones that are in drastic need of help and then offer your services. Like, it becomes more nuanced, and you need to have a better understanding of what is it that I'm actually good at or known for? What environments do I thrive in? And then you can go chase those.
And there's benefits to it. David mentioned about like what you want to be known for, and that can change over time, of course, and kind of fit what the market needs or how your personality changes or your interests change. But being in a niche, I mean, there is so much benefit to it. I was just thinking of a guy that I know who's he's a full-time woodworker, makes actually really good money, which is tough in that industry. And how he started was he was making little coasters, and he was selling them at different craft stores and he had a business card tucked in there, and people decided, hey, I know nobody who does woodworking. I want a custom table. Can you do a giant dining table? It has nothing to do with a coaster.
Right.
Woodworking skills, that is very, very different world. But how many woodworkers do you know? None.
Yeah.
So this is something, it's a potential. I was just thinking about it. There's a company, an airline that I interned at, and I like doing some of the analytics work, some of the data, more heavy stuff there. And there was a guy who was a contractor there doing the web analytics work. He started his own company doing this. It's actually a pretty cool startup, but it's very data heavy, not surprisingly, because that was kind of his mindset. And he was looking for somebody, so he kept talking to me. And I swear, every time I'm in between jobs, he reaches out saying like, hey man, you interested in doing this random analytical kind of work? And It's because who else do you know who's really good at doing web analytics or data analytic, large data model projects? Like, honestly, I can't really name that many people. So whenever you have that kind of weird situation, the numbers are really small. And if you're hitting this market who isn't very familiar with individuals in this market, you are one of the one and onlys, right? Now, if like everybody who I talked to knew other people who were, let's say, AI experts, they would never talk to me. But if I can interject myself in an audience who isn't so familiar with it, the broader audience, I'm their one and only.
Yeah.
So there's also like you niche down in some ways, but it also can be you take your niche and you try to publicize it to those who don't know that niche, right?
Well, that's always been our
now a niche again.
Right. And that's always been our recommendation for AI, right? Apply it to what you already know. So it's not I'm the AI expert, it's I'm the AI expert for content creation, for massive data sets, for new product introductions, whatever it is your role is and how you can figure out how to use it, that's where you can apply that. Yeah, I think this is a fascinating topic. I mean, clearly we've done a ton of episodes on it. We're going to do a ton more episodes on it, given the stats that Alex shared. Whenever we find ourselves in the same position.
Yep.
Yeah. So please share your thoughts. Let us know what resonates. What are you thinking? What are you experiencing? Another plug for the Pathways email newsletter, where we'll take some insights from this and do some more editorial on it, or deeper insights. So go sign up for that, and we'll see you in the next episode. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks,